Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and finally pulling out this Hero Arts coffee cup tags stamp set and the little coordinating die set. There is a coffee lovers blog hop going on that anyone can participate in, and I participated in the last one back in the fall. This is the winter one, so this set of course was perfect. So I'm using my mini Misty so that I can double stamp the main little coffee cup image here. And I'm using some Memento Ladybug ink, and funny enough, it actually stamped nearly perfect with just one impression. Hero Arts makes really good. Their photopolymer stamps are so good. They stamp so well, but usually when a stamp is brand new, you might need to stamp it several times. And I wanted to use the Misty for that because with all the little details, the words of this stamp in particular, trying to line it up without a Misty would be a pain in the butt. So I stamped it twice with that ink, and then there's the little holly image in the set, and I stamped that multiple times, double stamped all of them, and then stamped them 4 different times onto the same cardstock that was technically just a big scrap. I was experimenting before I started filming the video, but I'll get to that in a minute. So I'd stamped the coffee cup, and then, or the to-go cup, whatever, same thing, and the holly, and then I'm using the coordinating dies to die cut those, and I just tape them into place with some micropore tape. And then there is the die for the whipped cream, which you can see I'd stamped earlier, but I'm not using that. I just die cut plain white cardstock for that, and then ran that through my machine multiple times to die cut all the holly, and then I die cut a little scalloped rectangle from the craft, and I also die cut what I assumed was the coffee wrap, but I'll get to that in a second too, from some craft or Nina Desert Storm cardstock. So once I was done with all of my die cutting, this is when I realized that little coffee cup doesn't really work like that. It just is kind of too small unless you put it near the bottom of the mug, or the cup, which I was like, that looks weird. So I just set that aside and decided I'm not going to use it. Maybe I'm just thinking too hard, or I don't know what. So I set that aside. And for all of the little holly images, I wanted to color in the little berries themselves. So I just used my Clean Color Real Brush Marker. This is the Crimson one. And I was like, these would be great with like the Crystal Nouveau drops. Turns out I actually don't own a red one. So that was out. A person could, or else you could use enamel dots if you have. I don't have a red again. You could add stickles if you wanted. Could have added stickles on top of this, but I just decided in the end not to. Another thing you could do technically is add glossy accents on top of these. However, I find especially over anything that is red, glossy accents, it seems to like absorb the red and it just looks strange. It's a hit and miss sometimes. So I was like, I'm just going to leave it. Don't really feel like experimenting anymore today. So I just colored them in and I was happy with that. And then for this die cut like whipped cream piece, I used a Versamarker and filled in the top area that would be the whipped cream. And then I'm pouring over the Hero Arts puffy white embossing powder. Now this stuff is a little different. It's very kind of chunky. It's almost like a chunky embossing powder. So you don't want to tap it too hard because it will just come right off. And I'm also heating it up from underneath the cardstock so that the air from my heat tool isn't blowing directly on it at first, so that it doesn't blow off any of these particles. And it really is puffy. It's hard to see on the video. You can see it in the picture at the end, and I'll have the picture on my blog too. But it actually does puff up. It's different. So I did the one layer, and then I decided to go over it again with my Versamarker a second time. Got it all wet, and then added a second layer of the embossing powder, and that just thickened it up even more. So it gives that kind of cool puffy look without being too dimensional. This isn't like liquid applique and other things that really puff up. This is a lot flatter, and yet it just gives it that texture and dimension. So I love that. So once I was done heating all of that, I'm going to stamp this little whipped cream part just so I get that bottom piece. So I just inked that up with Tuxedo black ink from Memento, and then I'm going to quickly trim that out with my scissors, and then just run my Memento Tuxedo black marker along the edges to cover up the white edges just to make it look a little more finished. So did that, and then I'm going to adhere that into place along the bottom of that die cut there, so it looks like the whipped cream is on top of the actual mug or lid or cup, whatever. It's all, if it contains coffee, it's all the same thing to me, like semantics. Anyway, so adhered that in place with the Tombow Monomulti, and then I'm going to adhere the base and the top with some foam tape for a bit of dimension here. And then I'm going to adhere a couple of the holly images, one to the cup itself, and then the other one I just adhered to the bottom of that little die cut craft rectangle, just for a little bit of embellishment. So once I've got these adhered, I'm going to use some of the Echo Park I Love Christmas 6x6 papers that I showed in a haul like a month ago. I love this snowflake wood grain paper. It's so gorgeous. So I just trimmed it down with my paper trimmer to just slightly smaller than an A2 size card. So I trimmed down to about 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then I wanted to bring in some of the other papers from the pack. So I used my paper cutter again. And for this, I'm just eyeballing it to trim it just slightly larger than the die cut piece of craft cardstock, so it's peeking out beneath that. So I trimmed that down. I was happy with that, and in the end decided to use that little polka dot paper as well, even though after I was done stamping the coffee cup, I realized the stamp ink, like the Memento Ladybug ink, is a little bit brighter than the red in that pattern paper, but I made it work anyway. So couldn't not add it though, because it was red and it was polka dot. So pulled out my trimmer one more time and just quickly trimmed that down to fit onto the snowflake paper. And then I just used my ATG adhesive to adhere all of these into place. So I adhered all the patterned paper flat to each other. And then I decided to add some ribbon to my card. So I've got a lifetime supply of this AmyR's green gingham ribbon. So I wrapped that around the pattern paper, and then I taped it into place with some scotch tape. And then I took a second piece, threaded that through, and tied that into a bow, which I didn't add in the filming because you can't really see anything because my hands and my fingers were totally in the way the whole time. So tied that in a bow, trimmed off the ends with my scissors, and then adhered that coffee cup piece with more foam tape so it's popped up. And then my card base itself is more of the Nina Desert Storm cardstock. I had already cut the sheet in half, so it was a 4 1/4 by 11, so I'm going to score it at 5 1/2 inches with my Teflon bone folder, and then press down that seam so it ends up being a top folding A2 size card, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And then just making sure that everything still lines up decently, which it did. So I'm going to apply more adhesive to the back with my ATG and then adhere that into place. And then for the inside of the card, I just used one of the sentiments that comes in that same coffee cup tags stamp set. So got that, lined that up on my acrylic block, and then I'm just going to ink that up with my Memento Tuxedo black ink since it was sitting there all handy. So ink that up, and then I'm going to adhere those remaining 2 little holly images that I had already stamped and die cut and colored. So adhere those into place with my Tomo Monomalti, and that finished off the card. So I will have links below the video to my blog post with the pictures of the card, links to the supplies used. All that info is in the description box below the video. And there will also be info on the Coffee Lovers blog hop, which I will link to as well in my blog post, so check it out if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!